It is 3/2 of 2015. We're going to continue with our study of Alexander Kojeve and his phenomenology of right. We've looked at his preliminary outline, and now he gives us a great beneficial start here because he's going to give us his preliminary definitions. And whenever a thinker defines his concepts for us, it gives us a huge jump. So this becomes a very important early on lecture because we're going to get introduced to his concepts, and that is just a huge plus. Now, he presents his definitions within a triad of how the initial first model of the right reaches that first more mature element of universality. So he gives us a triad of universality just within 10 pages, 40 to 50, but that triad of universality encloses his definitions. So the triad is going to consist of a subjective right for 1, objective rule for 2, and realized institution for 3. All nested within that idea of triad of universality. So the subjective right refers to that debate and interaction that are taking place between subjects A and B at the de Kunta threshold of dialogue and debate and interaction, where we go with our very preliminary individualistic phenomenological model, and then we want to move on beyond that particular phenomenological model, and that's at the dialogical threshold or de Kunta threshold. And so that's where we begin here. We're at that area of debate and interaction. And the self possesses a subjective right of a proposed positing of action and effect. I go to this de Kunta threshold with my individual notion of what the juridical moment is trying to say. So I have a very much a subjective right of proposed action and effect. Now the self becomes juridical person who is the subject of the proposed participation in the general rule, and he can only call it general rule at this point because we haven't proceeded to any universality, so it's generality, not universality, not universal aspects at this point. And we're just looking forward to participating in the general right. So the juridical self has as one goal the objective right that the self is proposing as a potential positing. Therefore, our summary statement for block 1 is the juridical self posits a subjective right as an action effect to reach an object of right that will participate in the general right. So the steps listed in order are juridical self, subjective right, action effect, objective right, and the general right. But now we're going to move on to try to transition to something better and get out of individuality and to start moving at least a little bit toward universality. That might mean proto-concepts rather than full concepts, but still we got to make that initial move. So block 2 deals with objective rule. Now an objective rule consists of an applicable juridical doctrine and its subpoint particular legal rule. Now, to foresee the intervention of universality is called the thought of legal rule. So the self enters into this searching for and thinking of the applicable legal rule it might apply. This could be a legal rule that is orally implied, or it could be a legal rule that's actually explicitly written. So this is the situation's foundational juridical element, that if it is a potentially juridical situation, calling for existential investment and ethical import, then of course it's going to have a foundational juridical element to it. And to reach the actual moment of a relation of right, we must posit a corresponding action that corresponds to the foundational juridical element. So our goal is to try to reach some kind of a forward progressing correspondence that will move the juridical right forward toward the generic concept of justice. Now, 5, the fundamental juridical element consists of the following: a particular legal rule of objective law and obligation, and the juridical doctrine within which it is nested, along with the other legal rules that make up this particular juridical doctrine. So we find the particular legal rule that applies for the situation we're facing, but it's nested in something larger. It's nested in a doctrinal composition. So there's the particular nested within the general doctrine. Now, a mediating correspondence of our positing must participate in the juridical institution. So he brings in another term here, and the juridical institution is that which encloses all of the plurality of subjective rights that so choose to participate in this particular juridical tendency. So objective rule is particular as a legal rule, but it's also larger because it's nested in a doctrine. And then we search for correspondence by participating in its corresponding juridical institution. And that takes us to the third moment of realized institution for the Triad of Universality. And reaching universality means a correspondence to the juridical institution. Now, the national right of a society is equal to the totality of juridical institutions within which we participate in our environment. There's obviously more than just a singular juridical institution. There's a plurality of institutions. Well, that aggregate whole, that plurality in its entirety, constitutes a national right of a society. It's a societal conceptual universality of right. So now we have a resultant hierarchy that has grown from that one in block 1. We have subjective right, legal rule, a particular legal rule, juridical doctrine that encloses the nested legal rules, juridical institution of that mediating area of corresponding positing, juridical national right that encloses the plurality of institutions, and then finally he gives us one more concept, the phenomenon of right, which equals the plurality of institutions for a universal history. And that's the furthest step you can go. Now, the 4-step process for defining a phenomenon of right for a true historical universality: number 1, define the commonality of legal rules. Number 2, form descriptive definitions based on the context. 3, deal with lexical content of the evolving autonomy of legal rules. And then 4, of course, take a look at it within systematic structure and examine the syntax of the autonomous legal rules. Of course, that's all very familiar to us when you get into linguistic philosophy, and obviously Kojeve is going to use some of that here. But we have a great advantage here. We've got a tremendous advantage in knowing that he has given us now, in Lecture 1 there, we got a preliminary outline of what he wants to do, and now we have a preliminary lexical vocabulary. So that's a great way to begin. I love it when a thinker gives us his vocabulary and his definitions. So now we have a very, very well defined introductory set of outline and lexicon. And that'll take us to up through page 50.